by different things. And yeah, I mean, Tatanka winning by countout, not the best way to open the show as far as a finish.
DQ.
Wikipedia tells me he won by countout, so I'm just going by what I'm reading here. But they like you said, there's no clean finish here. I guess it was just kind of they didn't want either guy to lose, so that's what they came up with.
I dispute Wikipedia. There was an awkward spot at the end of the match where Michaels tripped the referee and pulled the referee outside, but it was like there was no really need for him to do that, so which is why I didn't get it. I did write down, and I don't want anybody to take offense to this, that Tatanka was like a dollar store version of Ricky Steamboat. He was kind of doing a lot of Ricky Steamboat's moves at this point. He did a cross body block. He did the chop off the top rope, and then there was something else he did. So for me, if we're giving star ratings to it, I went 3 stars, Joe.
Yeah, 3 even is probably about right. So that was the opener. The next match on the card was a tag match. It's the Steiner brothers versus the Head Shrinkers. So this was a period of time, which I don't think lasted very long, but where the Steiners were in the WWF, getting a push as a tag team. And this match I thought was pretty good. At the time when I was like 10 years old or whatever, I didn't really know necessarily too much about these teams. I knew that the Steiners were from WCW, but I didn't really know much more than that. But I thought the match was pretty hard hitting. There was some pretty good spots in it. And I don't know, I liked the match personally. So, I mean, I thought the show was off to a good start here with the Steiner brothers getting the victory over the Head Shrinkers.
For me, I just watched the Steiners versus the Head Shrinkers, but I watched Steiner Brothers versus the Samoan SWAT team probably 2 years earlier in the NWA. So it was kind of interesting that just 2 years prior, they were both in the NWA and tearing things up. I will say I'm going to give a lot of Bobby Heenan. My favorite line was Jim Ross called it a slobber knocker, which might have been the first time Jim Ross ever used slobber knocker in the WWF. And Heenan goes, a slobber knocker. I thought that's what they call the waitress at the Tip Top Cafe in downtown Tulsa. I was like, wow, that's the stuff you can get away with as Bobby Heenan. There was a messed up hot shot on this match on Scott Steiner. I don't know if you happen to recall, but Fatu whipped Scott Steiner off the rope, and then he caught him, and he went to, I guess, drop him on the catch him and then drop him backwards on the top rope, and he completely overshot it and literally dumped Scott Steiner full speed on his head outside of the ring. There was no replay back then, but you could see how angry Steiner got because the rest of the match he worked like super duper stiff. Fatu has a phenomenal super kick in this match, by the way. And I was also kind of surprised that it seemed like Scott was the Ricky Morton of the group at this point because he was getting beat on for quite a long time in this match until he made the hot tag to Rick. There was a great spot. It was, again, way, way before its time. Head Shrinkers had, I guess Fatu had Rick on his shoulders and a doomsday device, and Samu went to jump off the ropes. Rick caught him in midair on Samu's shoulders and hit him with a belly-to-belly backwards. It should have been the finish of the match. It wasn't. Unfortunately, there was a terrible Frankenstein that kind of, again, ruined the finish for me because he looked like Scott jumped way too early and he didn't catch Samu, and Samu dumped himself on his head anyway. I thought it was a good match. I didn't like it as much as you did. I went 2 3/4 stars on it.
I went like 3 1/4. I really thought it was very entertaining and hard hitting for whatever reasons there were. But given those first 2 matches, I thought the show was off to a decent start.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean it wasn't a bad match by any means, but I agree the undercard was really well, Joe. Unfortunately, it's about to get a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah. So here we go with the next match, which is a singles match between Doink the Clown and Crush, evil Doink the Clown at this time. And people who have watched this show may remember it for there being 2 Doinks as part of this match, which led to Doink the Clown beating Crush, one of the Doinks, I guess, beating Crush in this match, which at the time, again, when you're a kid and you're watching it, different than now when you kind of look back at it. But I was surprised to see that this was the case, given that I thought, Crush was in line for a pretty big push at the time. And in fact, I think at King of the Ring, a few months later, he would get an Intercontinental title shot. So I was surprised that Doink got the win here. And Obviously the Evil Doink character was abandoned not too long after this, maybe like by the end of the year or maybe early '94. So, but yeah, Doink the Clown, double doinks, man. How would that get over today?
Double doinks. Sounds like a Jasmine St. Clair video. The couple of things I took a note from this match. Macho, while I love him and his in-ring, he is terrible on commentary. I'm not saying he was forever, but I think the three-man booth of Macho Man Randy Savage, Bobby Heenan, and Jim Ross, really, really tough. Tough on Macho. He didn't really know what he was doing out there. And he was really trying to put over his buddy Crush, and it wasn't really working. I really think the Evil Doink character had legs. That's clearly where you're getting a lot of the Firefly Funhouse kind of stuff from, I think. His entrance song was great, too. How it started out as a dun, 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 and then just went like totally dark. I was a huge fan of the character. Crush was super green. He was wrestling for what, less than a year at this point, I think?
Well, he had been in Demolition
before
that.
Actually probably 3 years. Yeah, he actually longer than I thought. He still looked green in this match. He looked lost. Doink did a lot of stuff off the top rope that made no sense. And missing some things. The crowd was super dead. I think they were in an unenviable spot though, because like you said, the first two matches were good, and they were fast paced matches. And then to have Crush and Doink come out here, but I think the two Doinks. The idea behind that, like I said, the Evil Doink thing, it had legs. It could have been a really good gimmick, but they crushed it. Nice crush pun there. And then the babyface Doink came shortly after. Do you know if this was Matt Bourne or Big Josh at this point?
I think it was. Who was the original? Wait,
I think Matt Bourne was the original.
Isn't Matt Bourne? Is Matt Bourne not Big Josh?
Oh no, I'm sorry, Big Josh or who was the other guy that took over for him?
I don't know his name.
Anyway, regardless, I wasn't sure who it was, but interesting finish. Bobby Heenan really did his best to sell the fake arm that hit Crush. He's like, I see batteries in the ring, like just classic Bobby Heenan stuff. I went a star and a half on this one, Joe.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's really more, I guess, about the characters
and the gimmick, yeah,
and getting them over. So, there's really not much to it at that time. But yeah, I guess the thing was, like I was saying earlier, that was just a little bit a bummer is that they ended the Evil Doink character, kind of cut that run off and turned him into largely a comedy figure soon after that. And, it just didn't really get much further than that for either of these guys. So the next match is a pretty quick one. It's Razor Ramon and Bob Backlund. And this basically amounted to a glorified squash, I guess you could say, for Razor, who had come in with a lot of fanfare, got pushed to the top of the card pretty quickly. He would lose to Bret Hart at the Rumble a few months before this. And this feels like one of those old school WrestleMania matches that was kind of just tossed together and thrown on the card to make Razor look good and look strong. Backlund, this was during his comeback run, but not.
He wasn't crazy yet.
He was not yet turned heel. Yes, so he was still kind of just the old school, a little bit doofy Bob Backlund. So Razor got the win here in like less than 4 minutes.
Yeah. Listen, I actually watched this match twice. And what I wrote down in here is for WrestleMania, and who thought this was a good idea. Razor Ramon is super over, and he looks like a star. The crowd is behind every single thing he does. Bob Backlund seems like, watching this, doesn't it seem like Backlund's generation was like 20 years, 30, 40 years ago? Like, I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah, that's because it was, right? This is, you're talking about, he was late 70s, early 80s, I think was his thing. So,
dude, Backlund was as old in this match as John Cena is now.
Yeah, so his era was kind of gone by that point. And, I guess he was really just there. Yeah, I can't even really say to get a good match out of somebody in this particular case, but just because Razor beat him in short order. So it's probably just to give Razor some credibility. And
But if they're going to get Razor credibility, I feel like the last 2 minutes of this match, Razor should have been bumping like a savage for him. He did him like 3 of the worst hip tosses I've ever seen, and then back alone for a drop kick, completely missed it, to which the announcers called it, and then Razor had to sell it. And then if you want to get Razor over, why does he win with a roll-up at WrestleMania at 4 minutes against 43-year-old Bob Backlund? Why am I so mad about something that happened?
It seems like you've got a lot of hatred towards, a lot of underlying issues with Bob Backlund, and I'm not sure if that's because of his political history or what's going on there, but there seems to be something that you might need to work out with Uncle Bob.
Listen, half a star.
I can't even really rate it. It's too short. It's a squash. Squasharoo. Now we're getting to some of the meat and potatoes here of of WrestleMania-IX.
The meat's spoiled, Joe. It's spoiled meat.
It's kind of, I guess, the co-main event. It's in the middle of the show. It's the tag team championships. Money Inc., who are the champions, which is Ted DiBiase and IRS, versus Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. So there's some things, I guess, that we can discuss going into this. Number one is a big part of this feud, at least the angle that I remember the most, and I would guess maybe a lot of people remember the most, is Beefcake, people had known, had a history of a boating accident. His face had to be, quote unquote, put back together with plates and screws, if you listen to the WWF announcers at the time. And there was an angle on Raw, actually, where Money Inc. hit him in the face with the Halliburton briefcase.
Nice.
And, so it was a pretty pretty serious angle at that time. And I think it also led to a Jimmy Hart babyface turn around this time as well. So that's the one thing I think I remember going into it. The other thing I remember at the start of the match, which was there's all sorts of internet lore about Hulk Hogan's black eye that he comes out with during the match, which the WWF announcers indicated was due to, I believe, some sort of parasailing or boating accident of his own.
Jet ski accident was the
jet ski. There you go.
Cause, yeah.
But the rumors at the time were that he got punched in the face by Macho Man Randy Savage, because Savage thought he had an affair with Miss Elizabeth. So who knows what the real answer is, and I'm sure we won't get it out of Hulk Hogan. But that is the two different reasons behind why Hulk Hogan had a black eye and a pretty messed up eye at the time. And I will also say, I guess, just before as we get into this, is that I, at the time, was assuming that Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake would win the tag team titles, and was surprised that that was not the case.
Yeah, the match sucked. At the time, I also thought the same thing. I mean, clearly we know why he didn't do that. It was kind of a paint-by-numbers tag match, and neither one could really do much in terms of Hogan and Beefcake. So DiBiase did most of the heavy lifting, very dissimilar to how we did it when he tagged with Zeus. Or what am I thinking of? SummerSlam? That was DiBiase? No.
It was Macho Man, bro.
Who?
DiBiase and Andre was the year before.
Thank you. That's what I'm thinking of, yeah. Same deal. DiBiase did all the heavy lifting. It was filler to get Brutus a payday is really what it was, to get his buddy on the card. It was 40 minutes of complete. And I don't even want, whatever. 1 star. The match sucked. I had no use for it.
It was only 18 minutes, buddy. Maybe it felt like 40, but it was only
including the pre-match shenanigans and the post-match pose down.
Oh, you timed it out.
Yeah, it felt like 100.
Yeah, I mean, again, the match was not special. Unfortunately, it was somewhat boring in parts. Again, the ending was a little flat. I thought that I assumed that Hogan and Beefcake would win the tag titles here, because I thought Hogan was moving into that type of role, even at the time. How silly I was. So I think I gave it like maybe 2 stars. But again, I was surprised that they didn't win the titles. So
you just had this finish in the Shawn Michaels Tatanka match. So 2 out of 4 matches so far, you have a BS, chicanery finish, and spoiler, it's getting even worse. So next up, Joe, why don't you kick us off here?
We have Lex Luger against Mr. Perfect. So at this time, Lex Luger was still in the narcissist gimmick, which he had entered the WWF too. And Mr. Perfect was a babyface around this time. So, and I think a lot of people, myself included at the time, but probably some wrestling fans that were a little bit older were expecting this to be a very good match, because Luger had a pretty solid history of matches in WCW, NWA with guys like Ric Flair, Sting, and a few others. He was a champion there, and Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig had a solid run in the AWA and WWF for years. It was really not that good. I'm going to be honest. It was a little disappointing. Luger was just, I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is. I don't want to speculate. He didn't really seem super motivated for whatever reason. I don't know if things just didn't mix well during the match. It was not that great.